All right, and it is my pleasure today to introduce our speaker and presenter, Dr. Vonda Wright. Dr. Wright is the chief of the relatively new Northside Hospital Sports Medicine Network. She is board certified in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine and is an internationally recognized authority on active aging and mobility. An innovator and researcher, Dr. Wright has written 5 books, is the author and contributor to multiple peer-reviewed journal articles, and is frequently consulted by the media as a sports medicine authority. Originally from Chicago, Dr. Wright grew up on a farm in Kansas and currently lives in Alpharetta with her husband Peter and their blended family of 6 children. So with that, along with what she is an expert on in the medical field, I think it certainly lends Dr. Wright's expertise to the presentation today of being a CEO parent. And so with that, Dr. Wright, let me turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here. We're looking forward to hearing from you today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And we are so glad at the Orthopedic Institute to come and do programs in the community. And in fact, I've been out and about quite a bit in Forsyth County. So you may have seen me before, generally speaking about musculoskeletal topics. And just so everybody is really clear on what we're doing, you are absolutely right that the Northside Hospital Orthopedic Institute is relatively new. We were founded about 3 years ago, but we're not just sports medicine. We're every part of your musculoskeletal system from birth to death and everything in between. So we are really happy to serve this community. And I myself see patients on the Forsyth Hospital campus right off of exit 14. So we are always here to take care of you. But today I'm talking about something that is particularly relevant this year, which is how to be a CEO parent. But I think you're going to be surprised at what I'm calling CEO, not referring from the view from the C-suite, but really how to manage in these crazy times. We were just talking earlier before we went live about my perspective on this year, and I realize this has been a very, very, very hard year in a lot of perspectives, whether it's work, it's COVID, it's politics, it's the pandemic, certainly. But I think out of years like this, that we can pivot our perspective to see great opportunity. And so I'm really looking forward to 2021 and everything that will come with it as we have the opportunity to create our future. So today we're talking about how to be a CEO parent. And just in case you want to talk more about it, at the bottom of the slide is my social handle at Dr. Vonda Wright. That's where you find me everywhere on every platform. And I'm always interested in your ideas and ways you have worked this year to reinvent how we're living. So here we go. It is not easy to hold down work and home. And as I think about how we do that, and you heard in the introduction about all the hats I wear, or, you know, I love high heels. So I like to phrase it as all the shoes I wear, right? I wear tennis shoes because I'm a sports mom. I wear OR clogs because I'm a surgeon. I wear stilettos because I'm a businesswoman. But no matter how many hats you wear or how many different types of shoes you wear, the way I think of the relationship between work and home, I phrase it curb in, which is the home part, and curb out, which is our public facing, our work part. And for many of us, and I realize that many people today on this webinar are women, for many of us, we are both curb in and curb out. We're taking care of all realms of home and family life. And it hasn't been easy, but I'm going to tell you my perspective on this year has a positive spin on it because of how much I've learned, not only about myself, but about crisis management and about rethinking the future. So I think our perspective is really bright. So today we're talking about how to be a CEO parent, because when I thought about parenting, when I was first asked to talk about this subject, I thought, what do we have to do different now to not only get through this year, but to really thrive and be vital, healthy, active, joyful. So for me, C is how to be harness creativity and communication. E is energy and expectations, and O is outsourcing and overflowing. So we're going to go through a few of my ideas on each of these categories, and I don't stand before you as an expert in parenting. You know, I've done my share. We have a blended family of 6 children, and we still have one of our small children in the house, and I'm not an expert. So I am so happy to hear all of your suggestions on how to be a CEO parent right now. Whoops, I'm having trouble progressing. There we go. So C, how do we harness the power of creativity and communication? Well, during these times, I propose to you that we have to think differently. We have to think collaboratively instead of allowing the way we think about this time to be chaotic. And frankly, we just got to pull up our bootstraps and get it done. Now, look at this mother in this picture. I pulled this from the web a few days ago. There are lots and lots and lots of websites for mothers who are doctors or doctors who are also mothers. And this is a real live woman. She's a fellow, which means she's in the last stages of her training. And she is getting it done. She is in the closet because it's probably the most quiet place in the house. Her little person just needs to be close to mom. And she's on her computer typing out orders. You know, she was talking in her caption about she is just getting it done. And I think that's the way we have to frame what we're doing right now. It's not that we can separate work and life as much as we have before, because many of us are working from home. And during the COVID times, I myself was doing telemedicine visits from home. In fact, my department did about 1,000 telemedicine visits from late March to the month of April while we were virtually shut down so that we could get it done, still take care of people in Forsyth County and the region. So we have to think collaboratively. We have to join all areas of our work. Another way that we need to adapt as we work through the new meaning of work and parenting balancing is wartime communication. So what does that mean? Well, I am the chief at Northside's Orthopedic Institute for Sports Medicine, and I'm a strategic leader. I'm sure you've had many sessions on the different kinds of leaders, but I am a strategic leader, meaning I was brought here to set the 3 to 5 year trajectory of how to build a business, where we need to be, what the pillars we need to build around, how to develop within an institution a new business line. And then the best thing I've done in my job is I hired the very best people from around the country to lead in the way that they are experts, which is, for lack of a better word, tactical warfare. They're the on-the-ground people. And I let them go. I trust in the wisdom and knowledge of the people I've hired. But when we are in the middle of COVID, or in this crazed time where it doesn't feel like it's always felt, we pivoted to wartime communication. So what that meant was, instead of just having meetings with the leaders of my department, I called mass staff meetings where all 170 people that fall into my division met on phone calls. Because during these times, I think we need to be very, very careful of setting expectations, having everybody know what's going on at all levels, at all times. Not only because we have to execute in a different way, but frankly, because it makes people feel calm. It makes people have a sense of control again when everybody knows what goes on. But this does not only apply in the work setting. This applies at home. You know, no matter what the age of the people that are in your house, whether you're a multi-generational family like we are, my 80-year-old parents live with us, we have the nuclear family, we have 2 dogs. No matter who's in the house, This is an unsettling, anxious time. You need to implement wartime communication. If you don't do it already, this means having family meetings. This means setting the agenda for the week. That means setting expectations, maybe in a way you never had to do before when we were in the old normal. But high levels of expectation setting and wartime communication where everybody is at the table at the same time is very important right now. But what are some specific suggestions I have for the different ages, right? How are we going to manage everybody under one roof? Well, when your children are very, very young, they want to be with you. They want to mimic everything you do, just like this little person in the picture. So my suggestion is that you work in bursts of very high productivity. So instead of working steadily all day, maybe you choose 2 hours where you are just going to grind it out. You set your priorities. You have 4 things you must accomplish in those 4 hours. Or maybe you have one big report to write and you burst out the work. And maybe with your small children, that's when they're taking their naps. Or maybe that's when you have somebody in your home to expand you. You know, many of us have built a bubble of trusted people that we let in and out of our houses. Harness those relationships to set up times of burst activity. Another way to manage the work-life balance during COVID times with small children is to set up stations. Your children don't actually realize that you're doing work. They think you're just on your computer. So what I suggest is setting up stations for them and letting them do their work, because remember, the work of children is play. So set up stations around where you are that they can do their work. They're going to feel really involved with you. They're going to be occupied. And I suggest setting up these workstations for your children when you're answering your emails or whether you're doing things that don't need quite the concentration that your burst periods do. And finally, I'm throwing this out here and I might get a lot of hate mail about it. It is okay to extend yourself some grace. And when you really have to do something, engage digital education. I'm not saying throw your kid in front of the TV for 8 hours, but there are so many ways that they can learn digitally, either with a handheld or with your big TV screen. You may want to engage that now as we are learning with our young children to be creative and collaborative during this chaos. So then what do we do with our school age kids? You know, I found and have been asked to speak a lot about anxiety and resilience and hardiness during this crazy time. And lots of school age children are experiencing more anxiety than usual because there are no norms. But it reminds me of the pro athletes that I've taken care of for a lot of years. And it is really true that within high performance environments like pro athletes or in true CEO situations, that routine and ceremony increases performance. So during these times, I encourage you for school age children to structure their time as much as possible. Set a daily schedule, even if they're on their web school. Set a time for everything that they can count, that at 2 o'clock we do this, at 3 o'clock we do that. The routineness and the processes of doing the same thing all the time will calm them. And this is really important for soothing anxieties that are happening right now. And finally, what happens for our teenagers, right? Our little older children, they can occupy themselves. They know the work they have to do, but maybe they're not so good at time management because it's hard to stay focused all the time on a screen. As you know, your career people, you may have that difficulty too. Your mind just wanders. Tweens will need help with constructive time management so that they can pack work into bursts and not just extend the work late into the night because they have more time. And then finally, I want you to be kind to yourself and extend yourself some grace. Maybe you're a perfectionist. Maybe you're used to high level, flawless performance. In these times, I'm asking you to give yourself a break. You do not have to be perfect or do everything yourself. We can reorganize our lives. We can pivot to different alternatives. And in fact, you might need to extend so much grace that you say, I need to rebalance my whole workday. And maybe I'm going to get work done from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. when it's quiet in my house. And then again from 7 p.m. to 12 a.m. when it's quiet again. And just take the middle of the day to get the house settled and take care of everybody you do. And that seems like a long day, and it is, but maybe you're just going to have to be creative and give yourself grace in these times that we live in. So that's C, creativity and communication during COVID times. So E, CEO, energy and expectations. We cannot do everything. We are going to try to do our work. We are going to try to do our house. We only have so much energy in a day. We have to ask ourselves, what do we need to focus on? What is really important? How can we structure the day to do what we need to do, but not drive ourselves crazy, right? So the ways I like to think about this is to ask yourself the question, do you have to do everything? Does every task in every day require you? Or can you be creative and collaborative and outsource, right? This is actually a core value. Sometimes we think that we are so important to every single process that if we do not engage ourselves, that somebody's going to die. Or maybe you don't think someone's actually going to die, but you get this urgent feeling like, I've got to do this because I am the only one that can do this. You need to step back and ask yourselves realistically, am I really the only one who can do this? Or can I share and delegate and be collaborative? The next question you have to ask yourself in that process, knowing that we only have so much energy in a day, it's the truth. We only have so much energy. You need to ask yourself the question, what do you value? Now hear me when I say this. Here's two examples. What do you value? Do you value having clean clothes in the house? Or do you value you cleaning the clothes in the house, right? Or do you value having nutritious food? Or is the real value for you that you must prepare the nutritious food? They're different questions. Do you see the difference? You go about solving those problems in very different ways. If you value having nutritious food in the house, then you can buy it at the store. If you must prepare it yourself, that is a very different way, and you'll have to rebalance your energy other places. So ask yourself, do you have to do everything? And what do you value? The next question you need to ask yourself is what's important now? I have a dear friend who I trained with named Dr. Frank Schuler. He's a brilliant orthopedic surgeon. He's an MD, PhD, and he was on a skyrocket trajectory to the top of orthopedics until about 5 years ago when he developed a rare and crippling cancer. And he, for the last 5 years, has been fighting the battle of his life, trying to survive. He has 2 teenage children, and he wrote a book called What I've Learned from Cancer. So these are the questions that Frank Schuler, really evaluating what's important in his life and where he's going to spend his energy, are asking himself, what do you value? Those two questions were actually from his book. And what's important now? Sometimes we live our entire lives planning the future. I'm going to do this. 3 years, I'm going to do this. But you have to ask yourself, in a time when your energy is being pulled in so many directions, not only with work, but your children may actually be in the house with you while you're working, or you have a multi-generational family like I do. What's important now in this moment? And then we have to focus on that. And then finally, my last tip, when we're talking about the energy and expectations of being a CEO parent, is I'm going to ask you once again to give yourself a break. Extend some grace. I always ask myself, as I evaluate, I actually use this tool. What is the worst thing that's going to happen when I say no? What's the worst thing? You know, as a doctor, I always revert back to, is anybody going to die? Well, sometimes in my world, yes, the answer is yes. So I must act now. But in many of our lives, what is the worst thing that's going to happen if you say no and spend your energy in a different way? Is that nothing bad will happen. And so I want you to give yourself a break. You only have so much energy. How are you going to set expectations? How are you going to judge what's really important to you now? It's a really important thing. There's not that much energy to go around. Finally, when we're talking about being a CEO parent, we have to look at the O, which is outsourcing and overflowing. You need to think about accepting help. And this is hard for me. When I was a young surgeon, oh, so many years ago, and I still had stuff to prove, there was no way in God's green earth that I was going to let anybody lift the 300 patient for me, that I was going to let everybody do work that I knew I was capable of. But the fact is, a smart leader utilizes the smart people around them. Whether it's your 13-year-old, whether it's your coworker at work, you can outsource work to other people or tasks to other people to expand your energy. You know, I mentioned earlier that I've been asked to speak a lot lately about resilience and building grit and hardiness. And when we read the literature about the most resilient people in the world, those that have exhibited the highest levels of hardiness, we're looking at people who have been things like prisoners of war, or current Army Rangers, or people that have been just health-wise dealt a terrible lot in life, or have had severe accidents. And we look to see what they're doing that makes them so resilient. And the good news is that resilience and hardiness can be taught and learned and strengthened like a muscle. So one of the techniques that is everywhere in the resilience literature is living with a cup full of optimism. If you pivot your mindset from this is the worst possible year in our lives to this has been a bad year, but I am going to reprioritize. I'm going to create a future that I would never have gotten to had this not happened to our country. It pivots you from being a victim to being able to create your future. So here are some tips for this. Number one, you must have a mantra. It's that little thing that you say in your head when times get tough. My example, I have a mantra that I'm going to tell you about. When times get tough, like when I'm in mile 20 of a marathon, now I'm a runner, I'm not a great runner, but I have run some marathons, and about mile 20, I need all the help I can get. And so my mantra has two parts. It's in boca al lupo, to which you respond, crepe lupo. So what does that mean? In boca al lupo means in the mouth of the wolf. It means I am up against the worst thing I can imagine. This is hard. This is going to take it out of me. I am in the mouth of the wolf. The response is crepe lupo, which means in Italian, slay the wolf. And for me, at the end of a marathon, this means that I've been preparing for 6 months for this. I know I've got it in me. I may have to dig deep. I may have to go to a place in my mind and my body where I don't dig deep too many times, but I'm going to slay this wolf because I am capable. Whatever your mantra is, or even if you don't have one, make one up. This is that thing that's going to pivot you to your cup of optimism and help you get through this time. Number 2, you need to focus on your successes. Listen, sometimes we go through highly successful periods or even average days where everything goes right and we just ignore it. And then one bad thing happens and it wipes us out. You know, maybe it's a comment of a coworker, maybe something didn't quite go right at home. I encourage you to live with a cup full of optimism by recognizing and focusing on your successes. Maybe you start a gratitude jar. Maybe you just make a little notepad of everything you're thankful for. During COVID times, my 13-year-old daughter and I started writing in journals everything that we were grateful for and the successes we had had, because it pivots our mindset from the anxiety and the noise in our environments to the things that are going right. And our mind is highly susceptible to what we tell it to believe. You do not have to be a victim of the negative thoughts by exercising some of these skills. All of those tools will lead to an attitude of gratitude. Now, the next thing I want you to do is seek out positivity. And I'm going to say something, and I hope you take it the right way, but there have been times in my life that there have been people that are glass half empty, that are a mental, psychological, and physical drain to my well-being, or maybe to the office's well-being. Everybody else is doing great, but we've got this one person who's draining. I encourage you to surround yourself with positivity, people with like mindset. Maybe you can pivot the mindset of that negative person. Do not stay in an environment of negativity. And if it means letting go of your high school girlfriend who is sapping the living light out of your soul, maybe you have to take a break. And it sounds harsh, but sometimes self-care requires a new environment. And all these things will help you pivot your mindset so that your mindset is overflowing, so that you can really be a CEO parent in these times. So as we wind down, I want you to be encouraged, whether it's in your leadership positions or in your parenting, to be ambidextrous, realizing that we need to keep one hand on the past, pulling the operational efficiencies, everything that was good about the past that we can bring forward, but keeping one hand forward ambidextrously in the future, knowing that we are going to be able to create a future of innovation. We are going to be able to pivot, because in the example of the technology pivot that we talked about, the telemedicine that my office pivoted to, we are going to be able to hunker down. We are no longer going to hunker down, but we are going to harness all of the opportunities to pick the best from the past and drive it towards the future, and using new technologies to connect us in ways we've never had before. Because my friends, we're never returning to what the normal was. I'm just going to tell you now, do not get stuck looking backwards, but pivot to a forward-facing mindset. You have blank pages in front of you. You can live the life you envision. And by doing the things we've talked about today, and using the tools of being a CEO parent, you can build your emotional fortitude and look to the future optimistically. In my opinion, these are some of the worst of the times. But frankly, I am very optimistic about the future, that we are moving towards the best of times. I mean, think about 1918. Remember at the first of COVID, everyone was comparing it to the 1918 flu and how devastating that was for the country. And it was. And people learned how to live there. And they took everything they could from the past, but pivoted toward this future. And do you know why they call the Roaring 20s the Roaring 20s? It's because people had just come out of 1918 and all the devastation that happened at that time. And they brought forth all the great energy and poured it into a different way to live in the 1920s, the Roaring 20s. And so I hope for you in this short talk today, I've given you some tools for being a CEO parent, for harnessing creativity and communication, managing your energy and expectations, and outsourcing and building an overflowing positive mindset. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if you would like to get a hold of me in the future, you will find me everywhere at Dr. Vonda Wright. Thanks so much.